Hey y'all, welcome back to another video. My name is Christina. I'm currently a mom of one, expecting another one due in a few months. I love the Baby Whisperer, and so I made this channel just so I could talk more about her book and about how I used her book to help me with my daughter. Today we are going to talk a little more in depth about the Baby Whisperer solids advice, and especially how that compares to like the biggest trend right now in solids, which is baby-led weaning. And so we're going to look at some of the key similarities and differences between Tracy Hogg's method and baby-led weaning, and hopefully that can help inform you about both of those methods a little more, but also help you make a decision on what you want to do and what you believe is best for you and your child. I do have another video about the Baby Whisperer solids. I'll link it up here. It should come up there. And hopefully like that video will just break down for you everything she says in her chapter on solids in her book. The book is titled The Baby Whisperer Solves All Your Problems. I literally followed everything in her book. I did exactly what she said, exactly did it the way she said to do it. So I do have a lot of knowledge and expertise when it comes to exactly what she's written. I have not done baby-led weaning at all. I have just heard about it. I know people who are interested in it, people who have done it. So hopefully I can help aid you in making your decision. So first, we're going to look at the differences between the two methods. There's 4 key differences that really stand out to me. Then we'll take a look at the similarities. I've kind of narrowed down 3 similarities that really are important, I think. And of course, baby-led weaning looks really different depending on your values and on how you do it and whatnot. So I'm probably not going to get too into the specifics of it, but I would like to a little bit to help you understand it more. And I'm not going to get that into the specifics of Tracy Hogg's method because you can just watch that in my other video or you can read her chapter on it. Alright, so when it comes to the differences, the first one is that with baby-led weaning, there is a really big stress on your baby's independence. And so that's literally the name. It's baby-led weaning. And as we know, if we've read Tracy Hogg's book, anything that she's written is that she doesn't believe anything should ever be baby-led, that it's the parent's responsibility to lead our child in the way that we think that they should go. So obviously that is the biggest difference, it's just the principle of it. And it's not that Tracy Hogg is against independence, she just believes that it comes as a privilege more so. It should come later down the line. Our child should be eating independently and we want them to do that as soon as possible. But in order to start off and teach our children the way that we want them to learn how to eat, we need to model that for them and show them how that's done. So we really don't give our baby any control over what they eat, how much they eat. Obviously, we want to listen to them. We want to stop feeding them. We never force feed. We never make them finish their plate. They should be done when they're done. But we aren't going to let them take charge. The second biggest key difference that I've seen is obviously in the actual act of baby-led weaning. What you do is you give finger foods from the beginning, and with Tracy Hogg's method, it's the traditional purees from the start. With baby-led weaning though, I just want to say, I do know that it's important that you do some purees. Like obviously you want them to taste like applesauce or like peanut butter, like you want them to get all sorts of textures. That's an important part of that. So it's not like it's anti-puree, but when it comes to your child developmentally, really they can only handle finger foods once they're about 8 months and they've mastered the pincer grasp. That's where they can grasp something between these 2 fingers and actually bring it up to their mouth. Before that, they grab it like that, and it's really hard to eat food out of your hand that way. So Tracy highly recommends that you start doing those finger foods when they're old enough. You don't even have to wait till they can master it. You should just wait till and give them practice with it later once they're more familiar with food. But with Tracy Hogg's method, you do wait until they're closer to 8 months before you introduce finger foods. The baby-led weaning philosophy on this is that you give your child finger foods and foods with other textures besides purees from the start, and that helps them learn how to eat faster, and it can also help them learn how to eat safer, so they're not you know, being... Obviously, it's better when we place food in our own mouths. It's hard to know what to expect when somebody is spoon feeding you. If you've ever had like a friend or something like try to give you a spoonful of something, they do it wrong and they take the spoon out at a weird angle. I've had that before. Like, we know that we prefer to put food in our own mouths. I've like, even like breastfeeding, when I was stuck on the couch breastfeeding my daughter, my husband would come over and feed me lunch. And this was like, at the very beginning when I only had like one free hand, I needed his help, and I hated it because I just wanted to feed myself. And so I totally get this angle of your baby knows the best way to put food in their mouth, and once it's in their mouth, they expect it to be there and they can handle it better. The goal is to help them learn how to, you know, manipulate food in their mouth faster in that way, because if they're feeding themselves, then they know the way they can learn faster, the way that they should move their gums or their teeth or their tongue or whatever, and when they should swallow. And so it's really all about doing it faster. This is something that I would say my daughter definitely learned by a month of solids. Honestly, I was not really doing a lot of purees after 1 month. It was mostly just at the very beginning doing the baby whisperer method. I did not want to leave her on purees for very long. It's really just an introduction. And I can also understand if you're pro baby led weaning that you don't want your child to be stuck on purees. I don't believe any baby should have any purees after 8 months. And obviously there's stuff like applesauce, like what I mentioned earlier, that's just always a puree, so duh, that's what you're gonna eat. If you have a smoothie or yogurt, then it's just gonna always be that texture. But I wouldn't puree. I think I even stopped pureeing peas by 7 months. It was just like, you can handle it. But it's important that we don't expect too much of our baby, and that's one reason why Tracy Hogg and her method, she goes very slowly. That's why you start with purees. It's because you want to meet your baby where they're at. You don't want them to try to get to a certain point faster, because really they're not going to be able to feed themselves efficiently until they're closer to 8 months, no matter what. So are we pushing them too hard, especially our children who might have a more difficult time transitioning to solids? It might be more of a challenge for them to get going with baby-led weaning because of that challenge of being able to feed yourself. Additionally, when it comes to using a utensil, babies can really only master the use of a spoon and fork at the earliest 13 to 14 months. My daughter just now got the hang of it at 16 months, and she's been she's literally had a utensil at every single meal since she turned 1, since she was 12 months. So it's taken her 4 months of practice with a utensil to really get the hang of it. I think if we had given her one sooner, she might have gotten the hang of it sooner, but it's still a lot of practice. I don't think there's any use in giving it to them early. This is my personal opinion. If you give them a spoon or a fork at 6 months, they're just going to make a mess with it, which is why I like the idea of I hold the spoon until you're responsible enough to hold it, and I'm going to teach you how to hold it and how to use it. It was really around 12 months. Developmentally, that's also when children begin modeling our behavior. My daughter wanted to hold a spoon. She'd ask me for my spoon and my fork because she saw me doing it and she was interested in trying to figure that out for herself. So that was a clear indicator to me that she was ready developmentally for one, and she honestly never uses it to make a mess, and that to me was very important. We'll talk a little bit more about that in my 4th point of differences, but right now we'll do the 3rd point, which is that there is less change and transition with baby-led weaning than there is with the Tracy Hogg's method, or the traditional method, whatever you want to call it. And that makes a lot of sense, obviously, because you just introduce food, and it's just food is food no matter what texture it is with baby-led weaning. And then of course with Tracy Hogg's method, you start with purees and then you can move on to different textures that you think your baby can handle. I honestly, my daughter's a textbook baby, so this might be a key difference. When I transitioned her to more chunky foods, she didn't really notice. She clearly mastered purees very quickly, and so I didn't, you know, make everything so blended really from the beginning. So to her, it didn't really seem like she was actually going through change and transition. Even when I would introduce a new food, it wasn't like a giant obstacle. But with some children who are more touchy or grumpy or spirited, they're going to have a difficult time transitioning to solids. So the idea is baby led weaning is just one giant transition instead of a bunch of tiny little ones. And you wouldn't want your 9-month-old to still be slurping down purees if they're refusing to transition to finger foods. I think purees personally are beneficial in the transition just generally to solids, because everything about the way your child eats is changing. They're eating sitting upright for the first time ever. They have to swallow sitting upright. They've never done that before. They have to figure out how to use their mouth and chew and their tongue. And honestly, their whole digestive tract is changing. They're probably gonna be constipated for a few days. Their pooping is gonna completely change. So I think that's a giant transition, and it could even cause discomfort intestinally with your child. So personally, I like purees as a start because it does dumb food down a little bit, but it reaches their level, and I think it helps their body transition faster, so they're not dealing with like trying to figure out how to eat a chunk of banana when they're 6 months old for the first time ever. Instead, it's still like a similar texture to milk where they can just kind of move it around their mouth and swallow it. But it challenges them enough to be like, hey, this is something new, this is something different, and your body is going to have to adapt and change to eating this now. So depending on your child's temperament, you might want to go slower. You might want to use purees and then transition to something else as soon as you think they're ready. Or they might actually just do a lot better by just having all sorts of food plopped down in front of them. If you think it's gonna be harder, I have heard that babies who have a difficult time transitioning to solids do better with baby-led weaning. And I personally, I don't know exactly what that means or why. I haven't experienced that at all. But if you do think baby-led weaning is something that would be better for your child and that there would be less transition with that, then it's definitely worth a shot, you know? And then number 4, the biggest difference in my opinion is that baby-led weaning is very messy. And there's not really a lot of space in the philosophy to introduce manners when it comes to the table. And this could be very helpful for children who do need a more relaxed environment when they're exploring food, especially if like we really want to stay away from making our child anxious around food, around making a mess. And you know, kids hate being wiped. Oh my goodness. Like at the very beginning, like obviously my daughter just like couldn't tell, but like now trying to wipe my daughter's face or hands, it's like a fight. And I think most parents have experienced that before. But when it comes to messiness, I think that's a huge table manners problem. What I love about Tracy Hogg's like whole method is that she's all about, you start the way that you want to go. So you start from the very beginning. Day 1, the first time they sit in their chair to eat, you introduce table manners. And that's something that you can lighten up on and relax on as your child grows and learns. And that's something that we did, and that worked really well. I have never ever cleaned up a giant mess that my daughter has made. She does not throw food on the ground. I don't even have to tell her not to throw food on the ground. If she drops something on accident, like even if it's like a small piece of corn, she will let me know, and she will not eat another bite until the corn has been picked up. And I don't know why she does that specifically, but we did teach her from the beginning that we don't get food on the ground. It doesn't belong there. We don't play with our food. It goes into our mouth. And she does, you know, she'll play with her food a little bit now, but she's also in a stage where sensory play is a really big thing, so she's not trying to make a mess. She's just intrigued by textures and whatnot. I'm personally fine with that, so I don't enforce it too much. But at 6 months, if you're giving your child food, even with a spoon or fork, or just to feed themselves with their hands, you're going to have a big mess, and you're going to have a harder time enforcing manners at that time because children can't actually at that age do them, if that makes sense. So when I sat down with my daughter for the first time and I was feeding her purees, I had rules like she's not allowed to touch the spoon, because to me feeding yourself is something you need to learn how to do. You're not going to just figure it out on your own. It's going to be more of a privilege. And she wasn't allowed to touch her mouth because she would obviously have food all around her mouth as well. And that was because she didn't know what she was doing. She's 6 months old. Like, if she touched her mouth, she would just like, she didn't even really need to touch her mouth. Like right now she touches her mouth with purpose, I would say. Like she feels something and touches it, but back then she would just be like, I'm touching everything on my face. And so it was like a way to teach her, hey, don't touch your mouth because you're gonna make a mess and you're gonna get it everywhere, and that's not okay. That's not how we eat. So the beginning of solids, in my opinion, is the best time to introduce table manners. Obviously we don't have the same manners that we had then. She's allowed to feed herself, she's allowed to touch her food, she's allowed to touch her face, but she knows, because we enforce it from the beginning, that we're anti-mess, we're anti-play with food, and she still enjoys her food. She's never felt, I think, constrained in the way that she's eaten. If I were to, this is one thing where I've thought about this recently. If I were to be feeding her right now and not allowing her to feed herself, then that would be bad for both her and myself. So I just think it's totally appropriate to do it at the very beginning. And honestly, around 8 months, when I introduced finger foods, we really significantly dropped the amount of times I'd have to feed her. It was really just with like yogurt and things like that were like, you could not eat them with your hands, and I wasn't going to allow her to eat them with her hands either, because I couldn't even imagine the mess. So if messes aren't important to you, and this is one thing that Tracy Hogg obviously encourages, is you need to figure out your own table manners that you want to teach and enforce. And so if you're going to be more relaxed and just not really care about what your child does at the table, or if you do care about some things but not others, then baby-led weaning could be a good choice, because you're kind of giving up a semblance of control. You're putting the food in front of your child and you're just letting them do whatever with it. And you can still teach them, I think, at least not to throw it on the floor. You can teach them that they can touch it, that they can put it in their mouths, but it doesn't go on the floor. Like, I'm not saying you're completely giving up all control, but you are giving up a good amount of control. And so I just personally think, from my perspective, that it would be very difficult to enforce manners. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying it hasn't been done. I haven't experienced it, so I'm not sure. But that is one thing that you might be giving up a little in order to have a more relaxed environment while your child is eating. All right, that concludes all of the differences, and now I'm going to talk about the 3 ways that I believe that they're the same. And number 1 is there is a stress and an emphasis on baby joining the family table. And this is especially in baby-led weaning. It's really important that your baby eats the same meal as you, and you don't have to prepare something separate for them. And it's nice when they see, oh, you're eating rice and I'm eating rice, and you know, they can witness you doing it and they can copy you and enjoy the same thing, and they just feel like they're a part of the family. I love that idea. But Tracy Hogg also has that same idea. She believes that you should, as much as possible, eat every single meal with your child. But in her philosophy, it doesn't matter if they're eating the same thing as you or not. At the beginning, they shouldn't be eating the same thing as you, because you do want to go really slowly when you introduce foods to avoid allergens and to help their digestive system adjust. But by 8 months, my daughter was eating all of the same meals as us. I was somehow adapting the meal to her if it was something that would be more difficult for her to eat, or if there's parts of it she didn't like. And I still do that, honestly. Like, if we're eating burgers, I don't give her a burger. I give her like a deconstructed burger, and she eats all the pieces individually just because she doesn't know how to do that yet. But Tracy's huge thing is, like, by a year at the latest, your child needs to be eating meals with you. And this is more of like, I don't think it matters what your child is eating at all, but some people just don't eat meals together very often. It's not a very important part of people's lives. In some scenarios, especially if you're very busy or if both parents are working, it might not even align that they would have meals together often. So that's a little bit understandable. But It's extremely important for your child to be with you at the table, no matter what they're eating, no matter how they're eating it, no matter how old they are. Number 2 with similarities is that your baby should be given a wide range of food exposure. And this happens faster with baby-led weaning because you're not limited in what you can give them. You can literally give them anything. But I don't think speed is really an important part. I think we should definitely go slowly with exposure at the beginning, as our child physically has to adapt to eating actual solid food. But Tracy says you need to be always introducing new foods, and you should go slow because of allergens and whatnot. But I think after the first month, there's really no point in being worried about allergens except for if there's anything that runs in your family. But it's important to always be giving your child something different every time. And that is a trap I think most parents who start with purees can fall into, is it's just easy to be like, oh, here's this jar, like we always buy the same jars from the store, and that's just what you have, and you kind of cycle through and your baby doesn't get to have a lot of experience. What I would do, I've made all my own baby food. I don't think I ever bought baby food from the store, but I don't think it really matters because purees are only for a short amount of time anyway. So if you can't find the time to make them, then buying them is fine. But for me, because I made my own, I could just puree some of the food that we were eating. I would puree peas, and my husband and I would eat peas with our dinner, you know. It wasn't like we were creating something totally separate from what we were eating, but there were some days where my daughter had drastically different meals because I do tend, as an adult who cooks, I do tend to eat a lot of similar foods. Like I love to cook, so I switch up my meals every time I eat, but you know, like I don't eat crazy foods all the time, so I would have some foods that I'd want my daughter to be exposed to, but that I didn't necessarily want to plan a meal around. And there was just sometimes where I was like, oh, I want my daughter to eat squash. I don't really make squash a lot, but I can, so I'll just make it for our family that night because my daughter's going to have it. I think we should always be introducing new foods constantly. That is, again, I don't think that boils down to the method that you choose. I think it boils down to your philosophy as you eat your food. So if it's not important to you that you're having variety in your meals, then you're not going to give that to your child. So that's going to be the core issue. If your child's not eating a variety of meals, then you need to look at your own food habit and see, oh, is it because I don't eat a variety of meals? And if you do eat a variety of meals and you just have a difficult time coming up with things for your child, literally just give them what you're eating, puree or not, you know? And number 3, the biggest similarity is that your baby gets fed. And that is the most important thing here. It doesn't matter how you do it, it doesn't matter how they get it in them, as long as it's good food that's good for them, that it's ideally an enjoyable experience for both of you, and it works for you and your baby and your family. The goal is just by 1 year of age, they need to be getting most to all of their nutrients from the food that they're eating and not from breast milk or formula anymore. And that's the goal. When we start at 6 months, the goal is we have 6 months to get them there. And it can be a little relaxed. People say food under 1 is just for fun. It's not just for fun because it does provide some nutrients, especially at the beginning. But the goal is to literally have most of their diet be from solid food by the time they're 1. So it becomes less and less fun and more like we need to rely on this to nourish our children, but that's the important part. So just keep, however you're doing it, the only thing that you need to make sure of is that your child is getting nutrients from the food, no matter what type of food it is or what type of method that you're doing. That concludes today's video. Obviously, I'm a little biased because I've only done the baby whisperer method and it really worked well for me and my daughter, but I don't think that you can do anything wrong as long as you stay consistent. And that's of course a part of the baby whisperer philosophy, is that you stay consistent and you don't quit. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope that it was helpful for you in making a decision for you and your family, or maybe even just in educating you on the key differences of these two ideas. If you liked the video, please like it and give it a thumbs up. If you want to subscribe and stay tuned for more videos, please do the same as well. And if you have any questions or comments or stories or anything that you want to add in, then please feel free to leave that below. Additionally, if you have any video suggestions for other topics that we can talk about pertaining to the baby whisperer or pertaining to ways that we can compare her method with others, then leave that below as well. I would love to hear from y'all. Thanks for watching.